There's many things that goes hand in hand. Pizza and cheese, nice burger with cheese, macaroni and cheese, pretty much anything with cheese, and Halloween and horror. So in the spirit of Halloween, I present to thee the top 20 scariest enemies in gaming, plus like 6 honorable mentions, because there's just too many scary things out there. Like always, my opinions, yada yada, start with 19 entries, honorable mentions, then the number 1. You probably already know this. Let me also preface this list by saying that the scary enemy is more than its design. It's also sounds, surroundings, where the enemy appears, phobias and a lot more. So if a monster or enemy isn't scary to you or me, it might be for somebody else. Well, what are we waiting for? A horrible night perhaps? Spider-Man for the PS1 is one of the few games I played through more than one time. Now, Spider-Man isn't the scariest of games, even though I was scared as shit of those sewers and the drains. And if you play it today, well, you might as well be scared of the graphics, because every character looks like they've dragged their face across the pavement. But there comes a moment in the game, very late into it actually, where the game flips the shit around from the superhero theme and goes straight to fear-inducing nightmare fuel. And that moment is when the 20th spot enters the fucking fray, Doc-Ock Carnage. Like the name implies, Dr. Octopus fused with the symbiote named Carnage. Time begins ticking, and while you're trying to navigate small corridors while fighting the shitty camera, Monster Ock, as he's called, is right
Surprise,
behind you, screaming DIE! No matter how good you do. If you haven't felt the sensation of stress-inducing fear yet, I recommend trying to escape from Monster Ock. Friday the 13th for the NES may not be the scariest game, or, you know, actually scary at all, but back in the day it had that thick NES horror atmosphere that was hard to find, and the imagination of any young boy or girl can really twist things around and start creating realities out of nothing. This very fact is the reason that Jason from Friday the 13th even makes the list, despite his lack of obvious terror. Jason may appear almost anywhere at any time, which in turn builds the tension by being unpredictable. The addition of day and night cycles was an ambitious implementation, and in the end it helped make the game a tiny bit better than it originally was. By now you may ask, is this entry a joke? What the fu- Well, maybe. I've always just had that impression that enemies need not be overly scary in their design, but it's their actions and mannerisms that make them scary. Such is the case with Jason. I swear, the list gets better, I swear. The deep, dark sea have always made me shudder whenever the thought of what lurks beneath appears in my thoughts. The game starts out with generally friendly and benign fauna in beautiful, varied biomes that each has their own creatures and materials available to collect. But as you venture further down, you're more likely to come across harmful or aggressive fish, and even predators in some cases. Such was the case when I entered the Deep Grand Reef biome. After trekking around carefully in jolly naivety, I came across a creature that turned all my phobias from 0 to 100 in 0.2 seconds flat. The f***ing Crabsquid from Subnautica, the number 18th spot on this list. Not only is the creature in question a massive one, it looks like someone went a little wild after seeing Full Metal Alchemist and decided that combining a spider, squid, crab and those Metroids from Metroid would be a terrific idea. Well, it wasn't for me. I in fact screamed from the top of my lungs when one of these bastards snuck up on me from behind and began attacking me like a maniac. Crab squids? No thank you. The Kingdom Hearts games have always had this soft, very inviting graphic design, and the games themselves are mostly soft when it comes to the horrifying stuff. The dearly beloved main theme is one of the most beautiful, serene soundtracks I've ever possibly heard. So how come the game is even on the list? Well, the introductions in these games are stellar, and the enemy on this spot appear in one of these very introductions. The first game have you trekking through Sora's Dive to the Heart, in order to map out your personal playstyle and class essentially. These act as tutorials, and within each one of them you face a boss. The first game had the scariest enemy of them all. Coming in at number 17 on this list, Darkside, a towering giant with glowing yellow eyes and a huge hole in his chest. Holy shit, phobia intensifies. Then you beat him and think that the worst is over. Oh, glad I beat that guy, boom! What? He comes to your home and wrecks your entire peaceful island and everyone on it. Talk about a scary guy. Especially considering I was about 12-13 years old at the time. I still fear large beings like Darkside, to this day. Little Nightmares was a great little surprise. Blending atmospheric suspense with a lighter tone to horror, it successfully manages to create a unique blend of these elements and environments, making it widely regarded as a great video game. You never really fight anyone in this game, but instead you avoid them as you're in no way able to defend yourself. The scariest section in this entire game is when you stumble into the domain of the Janitor, the number 16th spot on this list. The reason why the Janitor is scary is mostly due to his extremely long arms and short length. He's been blinded because his fucking head has literally collapsed, revealing his skull in the process. Jesus Christ. Being chased by this maniac is probably among the most stressful things in video gaming. When you escape him, you breathe a short sigh of relief because you hope and pray to God that you never see him again. Whenever a game is built entirely with a specific theme in mind, it's important to get that theme right, otherwise the core vision may get screwed in the process. This wasn't the case for Dead by Daylight, when Behavior Interactive set out to create a player versus player survival horror game, in which the game functions much like a horror-fied cops versus robbers. Although the game's main selling point is horror, there aren't many killers in the game which are genuinely scary after facing them one time, but a particular killer still scares the bejesus out of me, and that very someone is Hag. While the Doctor would have been on this list for best design and being most scary IRL, probably, no one scares me like the Hag does. Hag relies on the most cliché thing in horror, jump scares. Her traps trigger whenever a survivor runs nearby, and if you as a survivor don't know you're facing a Hag, your inner child screamer will be brought forward when you trigger one. While jump scares are cliché, they sure as hell do work. Soma is a game I randomly decided to pick up, since it was cheap and seemed to be at least okay. Glad I did. It was one of the best indie experiences I've had, aside from Hollow Knight and Hyper Light Drifter. Being developed by the same people that made Amnesia, surprisingly enough, it takes place on a remote underwater research facility where machinery begins to take on human characteristics. After deciding to investigate, you in turn travel to other nearby facilities to uncover what the actual fuck has happened to make these places into the massive fear factories that they've become. In one of these facilities, you come across a horrifying robot girl, the number 14th spot on this list. Standing in her own solitude, she appears to be crying and in constant distress, but if you alert her, holy shit, it'll be the last thing you do. Her distorted vocals are creepy enough, but the fact that she may have been there for years, just wanting to know who she is, what to do, and if she's all alone makes it not only scary, but heartbreaking. She's mostly scary though. I'm going to be honest for once. I have not played Condemned, because I'm extremely easily frightened, especially by horror games. But after playing Condemned for some time, the player finds themselves in Botch Department Store, a seemingly abandoned store full of mannequins with warped holiday music jingling on in the background. It doesn't take long before you start to turn around more and more, as you feel like someone's watching you. Unbeknownst to you, your enemy has been right in front of you the entire time, dressed as mannequins. That's what makes them so creepy. You never know which one of them is real and which ones are batshit insane killers and drug addicts. The environment triggers your paranoia in the best way possible, and once that paranoia kicks in, that's where the game shines the most. Most of the Zelda games are considered very accessible to children and teenagers, not hoisting so much, if any, horror elements at all, or they're geniusly concealed. Despite what many may observe, Ocarina of Time is quite a dark game, and not in comparison to Majora's Mask maybe, but that game is seriously scary. There is an enemy in Ocarina of Time that I'm terrified by, and no, it's not the Skulltulas, and no, it's not Dead Hand either, even though they are scary. Instead, the 12th spot goes to the ReDeads. I mean, this is a game marketed to kids! ReDeads scares me as an adult. That should tell you something. Their blood-curdling screams when you step a bit too close to them is so frightening that Link completely freezes in place, unable to move, as these nightmares slowly shuffles closer and closer. Although the enemy design is creepy, it's mostly their behavior and the contrast between the overall lighter parts of Zelda to this. Silent Hill's fucking living nightmares. Let's move on. ReDeads have appeared in my nightmares enough as is. Until about 3 months ago, maybe 4, I hadn't ever played Amnesia, like at all. I'd seen some people play it, but only for a brief time. When I tried it, a close friend of mine literally invited me over for drinks, then lured me into the fucking cesspool of terror that is Amnesia. I hate first-person horrors, check. I hate not being able to defend myself, and I hate being chased, check, check. Amnesia ticks every single one of these boxes. Imagine me being drunk, a must when I play horror games, and paranoia kicks in. Not only that, but I'm introduced to the terrifying Gatherers, the main enemy in Amnesia, and the 11th spot on this list. Their twisted demeanor only helps to make them more scary as they rush you down. The player does best to not look directly at the foes, as their sanity will quickly be drained away. And if you're playing on hard difficulty, you'll die if it gets too low, only reinforcing the wild horror that these fiends possess. Throw in an old gothic castle, a sad and twisted backstory, and these guys become some of the most scary enemies in gaming. Now we're getting to the big boys, the top 10. The Evil Within was a game I largely looked over, after its admittedly mediocre introduction and the 24 FPS on consoles. After that, the game quickly picks up the pace, and in almost the blink of an eye it becomes quite the ride. The Silent Hills-esque psychological horror mixed with the action and scares of Resident Evil is a match made in hell, in the best way possible. A moment that has really stuck with me is when I simply minded my own business before being interrupted by jump-inducing screams. These particular screams belong to the monster known as Laura, a spider-formed, The Ring-esque abomination that will haunt you in-game as well as in your darkest dreams. Like, just take a look at this charming picture. Heck, I'll even show you her first appearance. Spoiler alert! So you try to kill her, except that your puny weapon seemingly does negative damage. Okay. From there on out, she may appear at random places here and there, scaring the shit out of you whenever she chooses to show her ugly face. Ugh, never again. Resident Evil as a franchise is easily one of the most successful ones out there. There are multiple video games, movies, not good ones unfortunately, comics, collectibles, and the list goes on. The first game was a massive success and actually coined the term survival horror. The second game is even more popular, selling almost 5 million copies for the PlayStation back in the day, and it's a classic video game. But my number 9 spot belongs to a guy from the third game. Let's say it together, shall we? Stars! Nemesis is a bio-organic weapon, towering over normal humans with a single purpose: to search, chase down and destroy any surviving STARS members. He takes an extreme amount of damage before falling, and he can even shoot at you with a freaking rocket launcher. Even if you do kill him, seemingly, he'll somehow return at different parts throughout the entire game. And it feels like an unbeatable foe that never stops chasing you, which is the goal of him. No matter how safe you may think you are, you never know when that STARS voice line pops and a giant unstoppable monster comes charging at you. Fun fact, I've been scared for Resident Evil since I was about 10 years old. Even though I have yet to finish Dead Space, it was the main focus when me and some friends had a LAN party a few years ago. Not only did Dead Space provide the immense atmosphere, it was also set in one of my favorite locales ever, space. And as you may know, in space, no one can hear you scream. Which I did, when the Necromorph from the same game came spurting out of a fucking vent right in front of my eyes. I was flabbergasted, wasting all my ammo, desperately trying to hit the agile foe. Only after I did, I learned how to kill them effectively, by severing their limbs, flipping the old formula of killing enemies in FPS games on its head, quite literally. The Necromorphs themselves are deadly with sharp claws, long Slenderman-like limbs, while being extremely nimble and fast. Although there are varying kinds of the Necromorph, the most standard slashers always holds a special place in my heart. One of the few horror games I finished by myself, sitting alone, is Resident Evil 4. The perfect blend of atmosphere, action and horror in my eyes. The start of the game wasn't so much horror focused, as it was more stressful with the occasional scare. After infiltrating an old castle owned by Napoleon Jr. here, and subsequently destroying him, you come upon a facility of sorts, where experiments and research on the last plagas have taken place. Cue the unsettling atmosphere and paranoia. Let's welcome the most unnerving enemy in gaming, shall we? The Regenerador. A plain shaking clay-colored enemy with horrifying teeth. What makes them so fucking scary is, well, listen to this. Oh, and did I forget to mention that they are almost impossible to kill the first time you meet them? Oh, did I forget to mention what happens when you shoot off their legs? Check it out. Goodbye, sleep. Iron Maidens are another fantastically charming enemy, which instead of massive teeth, they have, well, spikes, and they look like this. If these two enemies isn't nightmare fuel, I do not know what is. Fear is one of my mortal enemies, which is strange, because it's a non-living thing. I have been trying to play through the game for a short 2 years. This is entirely true, but hopefully I'll finish the game around this year, maybe in this November, hopefully. One of the most notable enemies in the game is the timid but powerful little girl known as Alma. This little rascal possesses psychic powers and is able to create visions for anyone in the vicinity. She may appear almost anywhere, and when she does, it's usually in correlation with a girlish giggle, but this supernatural phenomenon always happens as you hear a static radio transmission of sorts. You never really know if she's real or if she's just seen by the ones having the hallucinations, which lends to her mysterious yet scary nature. Whenever Alma is near, or when she appears to scare the ever-living shit out of you. Oh no. Oh no. I'm just going to... Oh! No shit is about to go down. This also makes the entirety of F.E.A.R a huge trip of paranoia, of second guessing your every move. If stuff that happens is real or not. Is life just suffering? Are we even alive? She has an extensive backstory and she's easily one of the more recognized and famous characters when it comes to horror games. Outlast as a game, while I refuse to play it alone, ever, is a masterpiece. It really is. The game uses a lot of clichés, but let's remember, clichés are clichés for a reason, and it manages to use most of them in a way that still feels fresh and new, somehow. The camera mechanic is simple, but it works and is needed, in a way that makes the game way scarier than it would be without it. What also makes the game scary is a giant brute with self-mutilated face that chases you throughout the entire game. Chris Walker, aka Strongfast. This hulking monstrosity used to be a soldier and later security guard. He patrols the Mount Massive asylum, killing any potential hosts for the main antagonist in the game, the Wall Rider. This ruthlessness and everlasting pursuit makes him a huge terror whenever he shows his ugly face. Seeing his shining teeth flickering in the darkness isn't something you'll easily forget, I promise you that. I have little more to say about this brute. I highly recommend Outlast 1 though, it's a masterpiece in horror gaming. Second game, not so much. I am not the biggest fan of the Alien franchise. I have yet to see any of the main movies. You all just hate me now, I can hear it all the way to here. I'm going to watch them all, don't you worry. Still, after the disappointment that was Alien Colonial Marines, it was refreshing when I first played Alien Isolation, a game drenched in atmosphere and what peak alien-related games may look like. To no one's surprise, the fourth spot rightfully belongs to the iconic Alien. The Xenomorph is the most famous extraterrestrial being, at least when it comes to horror, and it's not hard to imagine why. Tall insect-like design with a large head and tail, also sporting an extra, small mini-mouth. Hello! Its nimble movement and ability to crawl in small spaces and on ceilings result in an unpredictable, fast killer. Release that very same killer in a largely abandoned space station and let it hear your microphone when playing, yeah, I don't say more. The Xenomorph in Isolation not only lends to the scary atmosphere and tension, but it makes the entire game 1,000 times more exciting and scary. I hope we'll see more of the Alien in future horror themed games. I know I keep alluding to having a bunch of friends, but me and some friends. You've never heard that one before, have you? Played through Until Dawn around 3 years ago, and it was one of the best horror experiences to date, as we all went in completely blind and voted for most decisions in the game. The movie-like setup and interesting multi-layered characters makes this a must-play for horror fans. After quite a bit of playing, you'll encounter the main enemies in the game, the slender and crazy quick Wendigos. These monstrosities creeps me the fuck out mostly by their twitchy movement and from too chasing and waiting. They also remind me of a Donald Duck pocket I read when I was younger, which also was about Wendigos and their history. These creepy bastards are born by a human eating the flesh of another human because of starvation, which also makes me shudder. That's why they rated so highly by me. Their design, sure, but it's also the background story for them, which really still makes me uncomfortable. And after I've played the game, I have trouble sleeping sometimes. It really... The Wendigos act in twitches, mostly chasing its prey, before stopping for a brief second or two and then resuming the chase. Their vision tracks the prey through movements, so as long as you remain still, it's highly unlikely that they'll ever catch you. But try telling me to remain still while a Wendigo comes at me in 200 miles an hour, and I'll tell you, honestly, I'm dead either way. If you have yet to play System Shock 2 or heard about it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best horror games made, and it sits at a 92 on Metacritic, with good reason. Another reason why it should be hailed is that without it, Bioshock would never have been made, since it's the same developer, Irrational Games. Instead of opting for the overused jump scares and similar effects to create horror, it used a more psychological and atmospheric way to build tension and create fear. Mostly through the second place scariest enemy, Shodan, an artificial intelligence without moral restraints. Her stuttering, fluctuating pitch shifting of timbre voice accompanied by glitching is unnerving.
Access to the ship's computer. You will help me weaken Xerxes.
And without revealing too much about her, it makes her 1,000 times scarier. Her eerie-looking greyish cybernetic appearance perfectly complements her megalomaniac behavior and treatment of the player character. Honestly, I recommend you to play through the game yourself, even though it's starting to show its age. It's a worthwhile journey. The many elements that Bioshock and Dead Space implements themselves are sometimes even better in System Shock 2, just reinforcing its grandeur. Graphics doesn't make games good, and System Shock 2 is proof of that. But if you're a sucker for good graphics, there are talks that a System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition is in the works. It just remains to see how that one pans out. Now we're closing in on the #1 scariest enemy in gaming. It's been a long video, but stay put, because we've got some honorable mentions to, well, mention first. So before I reveal who scares me halfway to real death, let's go through a few boys that just missed the list.
I hunger, coward. Beware.
It has been a little more than 5 years since the gaming world lost something beautiful. In cancelling what would have been Silent Hills, a return to roots within the Silent Hill franchise, Konami amassed a massive amount of criticism, while Hideo left the sinking ship and went on to make his own company. All we have left is a promising demo named PT that will never be released. It is within this demo that players may encounter Lisa, the scariest enemy in all of gaming, the numero uno. Even though not much is known about this strange woman, she became iconic for the horror genre overnight. Her twitchy, inhuman movements in combination with her ability to catch the player off guard makes her an unpredictable nightmare. Her gouged out eye and horrifying moans only piles on to show how genuinely fucking scary she is. It doesn't help that she's always behind the player either, as shown by Lance McDonald on Twitter. I wouldn't dare touch PT if I was alone, because that would be the day that I officially die of terror. It's really unfortunate to see this type of game be cancelled, because it seemed to hold so much promise, both in the psychological horror themes and the idea behind the game itself. The Hideo, Norman, Guillermo combo was unreal, and yet it happened, only to be shattered by something we may never know fully. All that is left in the aftermath of this was, to be game, is a demo, not even available to everyone. It just makes you wonder what could have been. And that's it for my personal top 20 scariest enemies in gaming list. I hope you've enjoyed it, maybe gained some own ideas for your own personal list, or for games to play during this Spooktober. I always want to do more, but I've literally been swamped with work this October. And since I earn literally nothing from YouTube, this will have to do for now. Anyway, I hope you have the best or had the best Halloween ever this year. And hopefully, I'll see you guys in my next video. Have a good one. See ya.